Welcome everyone. This is amazing. We had over 400 people sign up for this seminar today, which is amazing. And thank you all for supporting this endeavor. We're hoping to be doing more of this stuff with CIMA and with this partnership. So this is amazing. What we're going to be doing today is our lovely panelists, who are fantastic, lent their time, are going to be sharing some stories, and we have some questions that have come up when you guys were signing up. So thank you for that. And we're going to encourage people to be asking questions, and we'll get to as many of them as we can today. So please send them in through the Q&A, which is, I believe, on most people's systems down at the bottom. And we will be talking a little bit about COVID, but it won't be our major focus on this. We're talking about release strategies in general at all levels of artists, and then we'll have a little bit of a conversation about COVID a little bit down the road. So why don't we get started and have each of our panelists introduce themselves. Mike, why don't you start?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Denny from MDM Recordings and Acronym Records. MDM is primarily a country label and country management label. Acronym Records, which is run by Tony Tarleton, is everything non-country, and Tony also manages as well too. So great to be here.
Awesome. How about you, Stephanie?
Hi, everyone. Stephanie here. I'm the Vice President and co-founder of Cronograph Records that I run with my husband, Cody. We have mostly a focus on jazz, about 90–95% jazz focus, and we have released some folk and some country music in the past. And I've been in the industry about, 15 years or so, and kind of married into it, so steep learning curve. And my roles have been, running the operations of the label, management, publicity, grant consulting. And I also work in presenting at an organization called the Arts Commons, which is the home of the Jack Singer Concert Hall in Calgary, Alberta. And that is Canada's third largest arts center, and I run their in-house presenting portfolio.
Awesome. And last but not least, Mr. Evan, how about you?
How's it going? Evan Newman, owner of the Outside Music Group. We're distribution management. We have two in-house labels, Outside Music and Next Door Records. And we've been in operation for about, 25 years. I've been there for 12 of them.
Awesome. And my name is Erin Kinghorn. I own Eek Productions, which is a traditional digital marketing company that focuses on music. And I'm also a managing partner of Digital Promotions Group here in Canada, which is a digital playlisting and US digital PR company with a partner out of the US. My background is I was the director of sales and marketing for Network Music Group for about 8 years, but Eek's been primarily my life for the last 12. So I feel really old when I mention both those numbers. So great way to start this off. And also I'm a CIMA board member. So I'm a big supporter of being able to do these kind of things. So why don't we get started? I think the first question that always kind of comes up with release strategies is, when do you start thinking about a release strategy? Why don't we start with you, Evan, on both the label side and as a distributor? When do you start talking to artists? When do you think you should be starting to talk to an artist?
For us, we start talking about release strategies when we start talking about when we're going to release the record, or when we're going to start making the record. So as soon as an artist is like, I want to make a record, we kind of pull out a calendar and figure out, okay, well, it's going to take you X amount of time to make this record. So let's look at a release date, 6 months, after completion, almost to a year. We kind of look at it from a year to two in advance, and we start sort of getting the team in place. So once a finished record or even a mixed record is delivered to us, we can start implementing those plans.
Stephanie, do you find the same kind of time frame for you guys for a year to 2 years when you're getting involved with the release?
Yeah, absolutely. And it depends on the type of release too. So we're mostly a licensing label. So we can come in at, any kind of step along the way from concept creation to after the music's done. But I would say that even if the music has come to us complete, the release strategy should be in the minds of artists right when they come up with the idea of having an album. And the reason I say that is if you're going to have funding for the project, this is what I love about grants so much. And everyone loves and hates grants. But it kind of forces you to lay the plan out and articulate it and have a timeline and a plan of action. So we all know that grants are not necessarily a reflection of what actually happens in reality, but it forces you to think about the process and get it down on paper, articulate it, and communicate it to a jury that's evaluating if the project has merit for funding.
And Mike, your label, you've been working with artists pretty much from from the developing of their career kind of straight through. You don't have a lot of changeover. How are you finding when you're planning out your releases? When do you guys start strategizing? Is it like right at the recording process, or is it even?
It's actually before the recording process.
Yeah.
Because of just where social media is going right now and content. When we're going into the studio, we're trying to capture as much as we possibly can so that we can use that later on down the line for posting and all the rest of that around the specific singles or around album launch and all the rest of that. I think one of the biggest things that I've seen, and I'm going to speak independent artists that are unsigned, is that so much focus goes into the actual making of the product and no time is ever spent on the advertising, marketing, and promotion of the actual product. So when they get back their finished masters, then they go into panic mode going, I got to get this out because I got to start recouping some of my costs, but they haven't put aside any budgets or any sort of a plan to recoup their costs outside of putting out in the streaming world. So we're trying to get ahead of the curve as much as we possibly can.
And do you guys feel that way? And anyone can jump in here. Like if you're an artist that is single driven, say in pop or urban, or there, it's actually moving into a lot of different other genres. Do you see that kind of planning still that kind of far timeline, or do you feel that those timelines can be shortened up a little bit?
I think if you're a new artist or developing, emerging artist, give yourself a lot of time. You've got to realize that, a lot of people say you want to put in as much money and effort into the promotion of a record as you did in the making of a record. And know that you have to build an awareness campaign and you have to reach so many people. There's a lot of artists who I speak to who sort of rely on the quality of their music. They're like, if I just put it up there, it'll gain its traction organically. When in fact, there is so much awareness and education that needs to be implemented that you should leave yourself with a single, if you're an unknown artist, sort of 6 months to a year or even an indefinite period of time, just to sort of be like, I've built relationships, I've built awareness so that when I do put out some music, there are people out there to listen to it and help you spread that word.
That's a really good point, Evan. One of the things that I stress with any of our new signings is that you only have the opportunity to be new once. Yep. So when you push go, everything has to be in place. That is the production, song quality, but your back end support stuff needs to be there as well too. That is crucial to getting you off the ground.
I find that, in the space and what we're working in is that we also have to always have the plan of what's the next thing after. Like once, the song comes out, what's the next steps, and making sure that that's planned out. So even if you are singles driven, you need to know what the next single after is, or, at least kind of keeping that system going rather than just, putting something out and then starting the cycle over again. So I think that's been kind of something we've definitely learned over the last couple of years. So why don't we talk about you guys getting involved with releases? Stephanie, at what point do you, because you're licensing most tracks, when do you start talking to an artist or you know, kind of when do you start seeing that consideration of bringing someone on?
Yeah, and different artists and different projects come to us in different ways. We're at the point now, we have a catalog of, I don't know, over 80 albums or so. And so we're fortunate in that we can be a little choosy about what we want to have added into that roster and into that catalog. And so we have some artists that we seek out with our interest to them. We have artists that come to us, and they come to us during the concept creation phase, or they come to us with a finished project. What we don't like to do anymore is to re-release something that's already been released. We used to do that, and we just weren't able to have our branding stamp on that since it had already been out into the world. So, and I would say in the jazz community, it's a really tight-knit community, and there's a lot of word of mouth about you know, the small group of labels in Canada, and we all kind of know each other. So it's a small group, and like word kind of gets around as to who's doing what and what's upcoming. And I just want to say a quick shout out to Mark at Greenleaf. That's a great label, I believe, based in New York, and great roster with an awesome Calgarian on there too. So Mark, if you have any comments to add on the jazz vein, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the chat.
Right. Evan, kind of looking at the distributor side with outside and that sort of thing. And I know that you guys aren't doing as much distribution these days and are more focused on the label, but maybe we can talk a little bit about, you know, the difference between you're getting involved, like when does the distributor get involved versus when, you know, the actual label is going to get involved?
On the distribution side, I mean, it's sort of, we work with the labels and the artists sort of on the delivery or sort of their initial email saying, hey, we have this record and it's coming out X day. So again, we always encourage them to give us as much time as possible for that education and awareness, and we'll work with our digital distribution team to, you know, upload it on the back end, get, you know, everything inputted, and make sure trade marketing's aware of it, so it's being pitched for playlisting and whatnot. And then there is the physical aspect of it, servicing retail. And so people got to keep in mind that, you know, if they're pressing LPs or CDs, you know, that in turn demands a long lead time as well. And sort of the
final these days, how long is the turnaround on that?
All depends. I mean, there are now places out there that you can pay for expedited service, but I always tell our artists that, you know, given now that test pressings are no longer a sure thing, that you're looking at, you know, 12 weeks sort of minimum on a turnaround.
Wow.
Yeah.
And on the label side, when are you guys looking at, you know, when you're looking to sign someone, like how far out is kind of that relationship for you guys?
You know, usually sometimes we'll sign a finished record, and that's a lot easier because we can sort of plot things out, and we have a very varying scenarios where sometimes we're dealing with international labels and partnerships. But for artists that we have worldwide rights to, you know, if we're licensing a record, we like to be able to take as much time as possible with it. And a key thing is building the asset, sort of what Mike said, is like once they enter the studio, they're thinking content creation. And we want to be able to have enough content created leading up to the release and then for a year or so after the release. And we're sort of constantly in a mode of creating content, because what's changed over the last 5 years in this business is that the release date becomes the end date. Whereas before the advent of streaming, the release date was sort of the beginning. But now it's just like, once you release a full record, people are like, okay, so what's next? So you've got to keep that machine rolling for as long as possible. And even now with COVID, it's just like, you've really got to sort of channel your content creation creativity because touring was the engine that kept that going. So now you've got to figure out, how do you prolong your campaign? And also the thing that we're up against as a label and artist is saturation. With the ability for people to release music, like we're at such a point of saturation that it's really hard for you to sort of, you know, gain any recognition as a new and emerging artist because of the amount of traffic that's out there. So it's a lot of, I mean, the artist is now sort of expected to not only create music, but create marketing and promotional material that the label can go and excuse the term, exploit.
Yeah.
Wow. Mike, is anything different than outside of what these two have been talking about when it comes to MDM, or is it?
Well, I think I might be able to just talk about like new signings to our company.
Sure.
So we recently signed 2 new artists, and I say recently, but the process to actually start the conversation, to get them signed, to start working on the back end, photos, all the rest of that stuff you need to do, and then finding the songs and getting them recorded. For the first artist, it was an 11-month process from the time we started the conversations to the time we released the first book. And for the second artist, it was 18 months in terms of the process of going through it. And again, I can't reiterate that. You're only new once. And you just need to take your time. As much as it hurts, you can't afford to make mistakes in the early days because it can be really costly. And if you're trying to get things off the ground, and in the country music genre, we rely so heavily on radio, that process of building those relationships with radio takes another year on top of the period of time that you started releasing music. So all of that planning, our marketing, our advertising, promotion, and our radio tour schedules for artists to get out on the road and start doing the country in the boardroom performance things for music directors and program directors. All of that is crucial leading up to release.
Yeah. So, let's go back to something that you just said, Evan, about the release date being the end date. I think that's very much kind of a place that a lot of people have been talking about, and a lot of people have been kind of bantering back and forth of, do I have to release all the tracks on my album and then release the album? How many tracks am I supposed to be releasing before I release the record? How far in between the tracks? So I'm just going to open it up to, anyone who wants to jump in right now, because Stephanie, it may be different when it comes to jazz, but, let's start with jazz. Like what, when you're looking at the strategy of releasing, that genre of music, kind of what is the strategy, or what is the, I don't want to say anything's typical these days because nothing's typical, but what's kind of your guidelines, I guess?
Yeah, for us, it's still mostly focused album based. We've tried some single releases, and we found it just has limited reach and limited exposure. Campus radio, which is the main focus for jazz in Canada, doesn't really accept jazz singles. Like, they just won't play it. They want a physical CD in their hand. They want to read the liner notes. They want to see when it was recorded, where it was recorded, who recorded it, who played on it. And so we found that this jazz singles just don't have the reach and the playlisting possibilities and listenership that a country or pop or hip hop project would have. We have done some of it with one of our artists, Lila Bialy, who's really great at the content creation and marketing assets. So if you guys want a great example of a specific artist that really has a strong branded presence on social media, Lila Bialy is her name. And she's kind of a pop jazz crossover, and it's vocal. So that makes a difference as well too. An instrumental single just has limited reach. So we still focus a lot on a physical product because jazz is such an experiential genre people like to go and see it and sit there and drink their wine and have, you know, some charcuterie and just have a lovely evening. And then because it's very much improv based, it just adds to that, you know, one-time experience that you're never going to have again, because it's a different thing every night. And the demographic is typically skewed older, so they may be less technologically savvy, and they still prefer to have a physical memento of an artist that they like. So for us, still the focus is largely physical. So that's where the closing down of the touring has really hurt, because artists aren't making that cash on the physical merch sales. So
yeah. Evan, Mike, what about you guys? You know, how many songs are you supposed to release before you release an album? Is there a formula these days?
Well, I think yes and no. And I think specific to Canadian artists, if you're tapping into the Factor world for production money, you have to play the game a little bit, because it's still built around releasing a minimum 6-song EP. What we're doing right now, because the country genre is a single by single world right now, is we'll go in the studio and record 3 songs at a time that are all singles. That gives us the availability to plan out 18 months. Because on average, we are working songs 6 months from the time we release them to the time we release the next one. So it allows us to get all that back end content and our back end built as we're releasing the songs and doing what we need to do to market, advertise, promote, get them on the radio, and do all that stuff. There are some emails that will go to Factor asking for as much extension time as we possibly can, so that when we get to the point where we absolutely have to release this EP or this album, that we're as many songs into the album as we possibly can, because it's not in our world anymore. We're going single by single, so we can change up the photos, change up all the assets, make it fresh for the streaming partners, and do what we can for radio. And if by chance the artist is aggressively writing all the time during this process, if we come across a must-have, it allows us to do that and schedule it in to get it in to replace one of those other 3 songs, or just get it scheduled so we know that it is coming, without losing the $4,000 or $5,000 for production on songs and all the rest of that stuff.
Evan, I know that you work with a lot of artists that, you know, obviously Mike has definitely a radio plan with everything that they're putting, or the majority of the things that you put out. What about people who don't have radio or not going to radio right off the bat, or just trying to set up the release of their record? You know, what is your standards, or what are your suggestions on how many songs should be going out? Should they be releasing the full record before they release the full record?
We do, you know, 3 to 4 singles leading up to the release of the record. We also utilize singles as bridges between projects. You know, an artist is going into the studio and they're recording a record and they've got a single ready. We'll put that single in a way to sort of build the story. Not expecting sort of huge numbers on it, but we'll use it to sort of keep the artist relevant and in the picture. And it also varies on genre for us and on the artist. And in this time, like we've, you know, kind of what Mike was saying is we get a lot of request extensions into Angela at Factor, because it just kind of, you know, we'll push release dates, and if we're getting traction on certain singles, then we'll push it. We do have a framework that we put in place, like, you know, when the singles are being released, but we can also push things back, push things up, depending on how things are rolling. You know, we try to utilize the CBC in Canada, the BBC, and then, you know, and depending on genre, we'll go to radio in the US, whether it be Americana or AAA.
So I'll just jump in quick if I can. So we have a band on our roster called Black Mountain Whiskey Rebellion, And we never have gone to radio with this act, and we just crossed over the 5 million stream mark with this band. And basically what we did was we took what we thought was the best song on the album, and we went to our streaming partners first, and we went over our launch plan and our strategy for what we were going to do and what the whole project was about in terms of encompassing all of those details. And we got really lucky as well too, which always factors into this. We had a 10-minute coffee meeting with the guy at Billboard in Nashville, and he loved it. He fell in love with it. Next thing you know, we got chosen as one of the 10 new hot country bands that you need to know in the Billboard issue before we'd even put the song out. And then it went to our streaming partners, and we got put on some pretty heavy duty international playlists, which just exploded for us. But the back end that supported this unknown band was the imaging was all black and white. Everything was organic, and everything had a purpose when it was posted or when it went out via social medias to create this organic feel of people discovering the band. And it worked out really well. We released 3 singles, almost 4 singles before we finally put the record out. And it worked out really well for us in that instance.
So here's a question that kind of comes up when I'm talking to people who want to talk to us about doing marketing, that they only want to release their music in Canada because they hope to get it licensed worldwide eventually. And I kind of go from the place of, you just want to find fans and get your music out there, and technically to get on playlists and that sort of thing, to have a worldwide release is, the most helpful because Canada is a smaller market. How do you guys put out all of your music worldwide, or do you look at it that you go kind of market by market, as it were?
We on the country side of our business, we're lucky we have a deal in Australia and New Zealand, and another partner, DSP, based in the US. But everything that we're releasing is day and date worldwide, and you cannot get on international playlists. And for us, it's major playlists coming out of Nashville within the country music genre if the track is not available worldwide. So in our instance for that, it is crucial for us to release worldwide on release day.
Do you guys find the same thing, Stephanie and Evan?
Yeah, for us, we just default to releasing worldwide unless there's an artist who specifically wants to target a very niche market, like touring and releasing in the UK as a focus country, or Australia for a couple-year period, or, the hot jazz markets of Germany. It's a very dense jazz market. But yeah, same thing for us, like Mike, as the tracks digitally need to be available worldwide. And we find that there's, jazz reviewers. It's not a huge list. So they are located in, across the US, across Canada, across Europe. So I think all of our deals except for one are worldwide deals.
Got it. So let's talk about, we're just going to finish up, we've been talking about digital, but what about physical these days? Like, should people be spending money to be manufacturing CDs? I know that there's been a surge of vinyl in certain genres and in certain markets, but, in the situation that we're currently in, and, going forward, do you guys feel that people need to be making physical right now?
I mean, from our perspective, prior to COVID, our international distributor, we're, ordering CDs for us. There are markets, France, Germany, Australia, Japan, and some, small sector is in the US. So, I would say in that sense, yeah, you're pressing, as per demand, and you talk to your distributor and say, like, do I have a chance? And your own audience as to if it works on the live setting, you're able to sell records at live shows. But for now, I mean, there's mail order, there's Bandcamp. Bandcamp has been huge, especially on their first Fridays of every month when 100% goes to the artist. That's big money. to have physical product to sell. Retail's shut down. That's it's become 30% of our revenue, physical sales. So we don't want to completely remove that. So we will continue to press records. The margins on LPs are pretty small. They're not huge money makers for us, you know, but we're pressing them. And I think as some of our artists who are consistently touring or have fans, we have an artist from New Zealand named Tammy Nielsen, and her digital number, her streaming numbers are okay, but her physical sales are huge. So it's her fans like vinyl. And it's same with a band we used to work with, and we put out 10 of their records, was the Sadies. Is that people love buying the Sadies LPs. So it all depends on what kind of artist you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think genre music as well too. For us, we will manufacture small runs if we know we're going out on tour or to cover off the summer festival season. But our days, at least in Canada anyway, of manufacturing for placement into Walmart and Sunrise and Amazon and Archambault, those days are over. It's too expensive. It's very risky because it's all on consignment, even though you have to pay your mechanicals and your manufacturing and all the rest of that stuff, and to ship 25 to 5,000 units to sell 15 to 50 and one through retail is just too risky. It's too expensive. Rather drive people to our website if they want it, and they can get a hard copy from there outside of touring.
So sorry,
I'll
go ahead.
quickly jump in here again.
Sure.
Like I mentioned earlier about the physical in jazz, it's still you know, an important thing for us. When we do a Canadian radio campaign, they want a physical. When we do an American radio campaign, we can send out anywhere between 200 to 400 CDs for promo to radio. So we still kind of have to have that. We haven't done a vinyl yet, but we're getting close, and we're going to try it for a legacy artist that we have kind of as a historic project. And what we're going to do with that is have people pre-order. So we'll do a limited pressing of, you know, 100 copies or so, and have people pre-order because, as we all know, it's expensive to do vinyl and hard to sit on that investment up front. So if we can do a little pre-release kind of special program like that for him, it's for Al Muirhead, who's now 84, 85. So that'll be exciting for us to try that kind of thing out. So
we do have we're getting a ton of questions in the chat, and guys, I'm going to try to get to as many of them as I can. But when someone's come up with, does anyone consider using USBs in the conversation of viable physical product these days? I know that had, you know, I remember 5 years ago people were starting to do that, but are you guys seeing that as a viable option?
We did something like that a couple of years ago. I think with when we were getting our music introduced to other parts of our industry, we created a USB stick and sent it out, but we never sold it as a retail money-making piece of product. No, never done that.
Okay.
yeah, same for us. We used it for promo at trade shows, and I'm sure they never got looked at or used by people. Just a nice fancy branded thing.
Yeah. So let's talk about the actual, Mike, when you were talking about, you know, everyone focuses on the recording of the record, but no one actually thinks about the promotion and the marketing and all that kind of stuff. So let's just start talking about that and putting together these plans. How do you guys come up with a budget? You know, maybe that's like, you just signed 2 brand new releases, or 2 artists, Mike. You don't have much of a track record for you right now, so you don't have a base. Where do you start on trying to figure out what you're going to spend?
Well, there's certain hard costs that we have a pretty good handle on. I mean, I'm fortunate enough that under the umbrella of MDM Recordings, we run as a full functioning label. So I know what my hard costs are for media and radio tracking and website design and graphic design and social media and all the rest of that stuff. And then at that point, once I have the base of what those costs are, then it is how many music videos are we going to do over the course of this project? How many are we going to do? What truly do we need to spend on social media and advertising? And then pulling it all together to make it make sense. So we're lucky in that because of our relationship with Factor and other plans that we've submitted, I have a general ballpark of where we're going to get, what we're going to get approved for when we put it in. And then once that approval comes in, you adjust your plans accordingly based on the dollars that you've been allocated, and just make the best of it. But sometimes we've gone out of pocket with stuff where if a really good idea has come in that we can't alter the plan on, but the spend makes sense, I will make the spend and do that, because I'm not going to let dollars and cents, as crazy as this is going to sound, I don't want dollars and cents to dictate how we do things. I want to be passionate and driven on the end game, which is success of the song, success of the artist, because that money will come back in other ways later on down the line.
And how about for you, Evan, like for the label, obviously it would probably be similar to what Mike's doing, but on the distribution side between the two, are there different ways that you're going about and figuring out how much is going to be spent or how it's going to be spent, I guess?
Well, on the distribution side, it's all up to the label and how much they want to spend. We present them, you know, retail marketing options. And for us, it's very similar to Mike. It's like we have the hard costs. We have to, you know, build the team around it. We know that, you know, PR and radio and whatnot, you know, on a global scale is going to cost us X amount of dollars. Usually it's the fluctuation comes within content creation. And also, I mean, we make sure we have a reserve beyond what we ask for. If something takes off or there's something that pops up that we need to sort of put some money into. Our biggest cost is sort of personnel, because we outsource everything nowadays. So it's really, you know, that's a set budget. And, you know, depending, we have stuff for Canada only, we have global stuff. We have artists that we manage where we look at some of our investment on the label side as a bit of a loss leader that we'll might make up for it through management commissions. So every project beyond sort of hiring the PR and promotion personnel fluctuates between, you know, how much is needed and the artist's, you know, earning potential as well.
Yeah. So you guys were just talking about, you know, hiring PR and radio trackers and that sort of thing. Stephanie, how do you go about selecting the proper team for one of your releases? Do you have a set team that you consistently go to, or, you know, is it a variety of different things that come into play?
I'm a creature of habit, and I like to use the same team because I know they're good. They're really good at what they do, and they achieve really great results for us. And they've been working with us for a number of years, and they are specialists in the jazz genre. And we've found that more successful than using a team specifically on like the PR side, for example, that isn't focused necessarily in the jazz niche. What I can say to budgets is we have a different model kind of from our label side, because we take a lower royalty percentage. We don't really work too much on like a recoupable basis. So what that means for us is we work on a cost sharing basis with our artists. Because we're not making millions of dollars as a jazz label, it's really an investment from us and also from the artist side. So a lot of it depends on how much skin the artist can put in the game. So if they've got a budget to work with, or they've got their own marketing funding, whatnot, we're able to do a big international campaign that includes a 400 station US release with outside PR consultants. Or if the budget is more limited, you know, we still do have that expertise in house. It's just not our 100% focus of our time, because that's not what we do as consultants. So we're able to still achieve results on a lower scale budget. Just for us, it's not a mandate of making a lot of revenues, because there just aren't a lot of revenues to be made. It's more of an artistic mandate to get that music out there and share it with the world.
Right. And
can I just jump in real quick, Erin, just on one other thing?
sure, of course.
I think as we're touching on the funding and budgets and all the rest of that stuff, as great as our funding agencies are in this country, both the regional and the national, just because you do an application doesn't mean you're approved. And if you're not approved and you've already gone forward with a plan, you've got, and you're in it, then you're locked into it. We had that happen with one of our bigger artists that was not factor related, and we put together a pretty elaborate plan based on previous funding that we had gotten regionally, and found out, well, we had 29 people sitting in Kelowna in hotel rooms for 2 days that we didn't get the funding, and it ended up being a very costly venture for us, but fortunately, song work, it was not fun for a couple of days. So I mean, spending within your means, especially for the younger developing artists, is crucial when you're at this stage of the game.
Yeah, and I actually wanted to go to you guys, and for independent artists, because I know that there's a number of them who are on this panel. When should they be approaching a third party PR person, or say a marketing person, or where do you guys think that should be within the release strategy? Because I know for me, I end up getting calls and the record's coming out in 4 days. Which for me, I find for what we do on the marketing side and also on the playlisting side, is that on the marketing side, I'm looking to be at least 8 weeks out before we're even thinking about putting anything out. And on the playlisting side, we're really kind of looking at about 5 weeks. What are you guys, with those kind of timelines, for someone who's indie and is trying to do this themselves, where do you kind of think that they should be looking at bringing people on?
I would start the conversation with your preferred service providers in advance. They're gonna wanna hear the music though, because it's their reputation on the line. So if you don't have the music yet, start that relationship well in advance, because it always helps to have one of their proposals in your grant application, to be honest. And keep that conversation going with them as you're leading up into creating the music, and once you have master, send it along for them to review, because they're not obligated to say yes to you.
So true, right? Just to let everyone in the audience know, and panelists, I think we're all good to kind of go past 2 o'clock, right? Because we're already at 1:52. Time flies when we're having fun. Shocking. And we want to get to some more quick questions, and of course we have some stuff to talk about COVID. So everyone's okay with staying on a little bit past 2 o'clock, maybe an extra 15-20 minutes. Cool.
Yep.
Perfect. So maybe we can kind of take this time to talk to each of you about how to make a release successful. Maybe each of you can kind of use one of your artists as an example. Like, what are some good steps in terms of creating awareness and building excitement towards a release? Like, what are kind of those tips and tricks that can kind of get some good interaction and can make someone's release successful? Mike, do you want to start?
Not really. That's a loaded question.
I asked you to reveal behind the curtain, like all of your tips and tricks.
Yeah, there's not that many. I mean, a lot of what this business is starts with great songs. And to just back up where we were a little bit, for an independent artist and bringing in a radio tracker and a media publicity person, I know in the world that we're in right now, where independent artists have more control than they've ever had, I would spend the initial time developing my social platforms to the nth degree, working and building my streaming numbers as much as I possibly can, so that when I do finally get to the point where I can present my music, one social media looks like streaming numbers, it becomes a lot more attractive to those media publicity people and to radio promotion teams, because it's in the country music genre again, and it's very narrow in Canada. It is so competitive that you can spend a lot of money chasing it just in one single and be done and not have the momentum. And I think that goes back to what I said right off the top, where most independent artists do not budget for the amount of time it's going to take to get things off the ground, get things running, and get things to the point where you're actually breaking even and or making money. I am adamant with every artist that we sign within our camp that it's a 3 to 5 process from the time we start to the time that we actually get to the point where you're breaking even and or making money. So it starts though with 1, having the songs, 2, defining yourself, what sets you apart, what makes you different from anybody else who's on the radio or in the scene, and what is your thing that you can develop outside of your artistry. So for example, Jess Moskalouk, she does nails. She's a nail technician. She loves doing that stuff. That was her thing. And in the early days, we utilized her hair and makeup and nail thing to create a YouTube channel that eventually, we were on radio tours, we would do contesting with the radio stations for bands to win their way into the interview and acoustic performance, and then Jess would do their hair and nails and makeup after. And what happened was we would end up being in the radio stations for 2 hours, and every 15 minutes they would cut back to Jess and to ask her more questions about her music. It was brilliant, and because we got this unbelievable amount of advertising that we never had to pay for. But that uniqueness is what stood her apart. So the same thing with Black Mountain Whiskey Rebellion in our camp is radically different than what Jess Moskalouk is, which is different than Bobby Wills. And I think finding that lane is crucial to getting to the point where you can get it on and get yourself successful.
I definitely agree with all of what Mike said there. That's literally what was in my notes, is start with the music and make great music. And in the creation of the music and thinking about yourself and your positioning as an artist, what does make you unique. And so I'll give you a few examples here. Al Muirhead, who like I said is 84, 85 now, we put out his first album at 79 years old after, a 70-year career. So that was a pretty unique story. The album featured Tommy Banks, the late great Tommy Banks, on piano, and PJ Perry. And it earned him a JUNO nomination at 79 years old for his first recording. So that made national media headlines. So it was really, really awesome for him. So unique story for him, which was really cool. We have an artist out of Edmonton, Audrey Ochoa. She's an example of an artist that had some projects in past that were really awesome. So we pursued her to join the label because we wanted to work with her. She's a female instrumentalist in jazz, which is rare, and she's a visible minority by chance. So that in itself, a female instrumentalist makes her quite unique because she's at such a high level. So she's had a really interesting career path. She was invited down to the Jazz Education Network conference a couple years back in New Orleans, and the University of North Texas 1 O'Clock Lab Band performed a big band arrangement of one of her songs. The director of the band had heard her music on the campus radio down there. Thanks to our wonderful American radio promoter, and invited her down. She performed this music with the band and jazz greats like Chris Potter and Marcus Miller. And from there, career has just gone like that. She's been Obviously, we've had to cancel a lot this year so far, but she's been invited as a guest, like artist in residence down at American universities, which is a really unique kind of performance and touring opportunity that isn't available to a lot of genres because of the experience she has in teaching music. She does a lot of that in Edmonton. And then one other example I have is we had a debut project from a band based here in Calgary, and it was an instrumental saxophone album. But what was unique about it, it was 3 baritone saxophone, which doesn't really happen. And they focused the melodies around the combination of the harmonies of the bari. So actually that was one of our most successful albums, which kind of shocked us all. But it was unique, and we had great visuals and great music to go with it. So
Awesome. Evan?
You know, it's for us, and I think I can speak for Mike and Stephanie as well. It's like we're trying to work with career artists, and knowing that we're building towards, you know, a career that's going to build a catalog for us. Charlotte Cornfield's an artist we just recently picked up, and she was sort of 3 records in, and we're looking sort of really long for her. Jill Barber, it took her 10 years, and we went gold on a record. And we're continuing, you know, artists evolve. We recently signed our first hip hop artist, Hua Lee, out of Montreal, and she's on her first record. And we just look at it and we're like, what is our, you know, 5-year plan here to build her career, both creatively and on record. And with the industry evolving, it's sort of a way to keep up. Tammy Nielsen, as I was mentioning before, an artist in New Zealand, you know, she sort of built her career in New Zealand, and then we were able to export it. And sometimes a lot of the strategies in place are to take care of your own backyard first because of funding. Some of our artists, Rose Cousins, built her career in Canada where she became eligible for Star Maker, which allowed her to expand internationally because of the great programs involved with Star Maker, where you're getting tour subsidies, where it made sense, where you weren't taking on the losses you might if you didn't have it. And it's hard to be a sustainable artist touring internationally if you don't have the support from whether it be Factor or your provincial organizations or Star Maker. So we're looking at it in a way, when we sign an artist, we're just like, we can't do of the moment signings. We can't look at something and going, oh, we're going to sign something because it sounds like this that's currently doing well. We're not looking for that thing. We're looking for artists who have career longevity, are first person creators for the most part too, who are, you know, songwriters themselves, are great at collaboration, are great performers. You know, present time excluded, like being able to perform live is a key asset to career longevity and success.
So, you know, one of the questions that's coming up a couple of times right now is, how do you get your music noticed on a global scale when you're relatively unknown, except in your local community, and like you have a small social media presence? Like, what are kind of some things that people should, i.e. be trapped at home right now and need to get their music kind of out to a bigger scale because they're not able to tour? What are the things that people should be thinking about these days?
Well, I like the fact that what Evan said in terms of developing your own backyard first, whether that's regionally in the area that you live and then expanding out through Canada. But at the same time, if you have the opportunity to spend some time and find some bloggers and some people who are interested in your genre of music, taking those people out and sending them your music, and start the process of developing your followers and developing people who are interested in your music. Because those fans that come in on the ground level, we refer to them as the super fans, will do anything for you to get the word out on your music. And if you're engaging them on a personal level and can bring them in, they will start spreading the word for you. And again, that's really free. It's the time and energy of communicating with them, but finding those grassroots people who are into what you're doing on budgets and stuff.
Yeah.
One recommendation I always like to give artists is if you're going to do a DIY campaign, look at similar artists to yourself that are have had success already, and look at where they're getting media attention. Look at who their team members are, and it can give you a good starting point of people and places to target. One other recommendation I have is I have an artist who has really gotten into TikTok, and it has really helped share his music quite widely beyond just the normal streaming. So it's been really interesting to watch that growth over the last few months.
Evan, do you have any suggestions, or should I just
Just keep it rolling?
Just keep it rolling? Okay. Well, how about this one as a question to you guys? People keep talking about, getting 1 million streams and, 10 million streams and, all these huge streaming numbers. But for an independent artist or a developing artist or someone that you're kind of working with and getting off the ground, for social media numbers and streaming numbers, what do you see as a breakout success? Like when you hit something where you're kind of like, that we've got something here, by genre, maybe Mike, you want to start when it comes to country, where do you kind of seeing like where it's like, okay, we've got something here and let's keep going?
Because we do it song by song, I don't know if there is a benchmark. I mean, obviously the 1 million stream mark becomes kind of the plateau. But the problem that I'm seeing, at least within our genre anyway, is that just because you got on a bunch of really good playlists on the last single doesn't necessarily mean you get on the same playlist for the next single, even though you may have as much success at radio or more success. It doesn't always translate back to the streaming thing. So you've got to have, like anything in this business, fluidity to be able to adapt and understand that just because you don't get 1 million streams on this one you did on the last one, that it doesn't mean that people don't like it. It just means it's not getting out there to the same extent as what it did. One of our new artists that we put out, we released his song to radio on Christmas Day. We released the song digitally to the streaming world 5 days before that. We got really lucky and got chosen as the iHeart Future Star program for January and February of this year, and the song has exploded on us. We're doing 30,000 streams a day on this. We're now closed streams worldwide, and as great as it is, in that we're in push week and potentially could go #1, I don't know if I'm going to be able to duplicate this on the next song, which is really scary to think of, but it's given them the platform to get going.
Evan,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you kind of the same question, kind of in the folk singer songwriter kind of indie kind of area. What are you kind of seeing, or where would you kind of gauge success when it comes to social media numbers and streaming numbers?
See, there's been especially in the singer songwriter community, there's sort of there's a false narrative going on, and as copyright owners with labels, there's an opportunity to maximize upon lean back listening. I think you've heard the story before, Erin, where I've always been approached by this manager whose artist has over 100 million streams, and that's because their label has been able to manipulate algorithms with the streaming services to enable this artist to get massive audience on playlists and on all DSP platforms. But in itself, the artist is not worth 20 tickets in a room. So sometimes an artist will approach us and say, hey, I have all these, you know, these listens or these streams on these platforms, but you look at it and you're like, the amount of streams versus the amount of saves, meaning that people aren't exactly engaging in the artist. They're hearing the song, but it's kind of like, in a way, commercial radio, where it's sort of in the background, but the repetition isn't there per person. Like someone's not going and listening to the same playlist every day as they would the same radio station. So social engagement is great. You can have a lot of followers, but if they're not engaging with you, then what are they? Are they bought, or is it just sort of this blanket thing? You really want to see a level of engagement. You want to see interaction. You want to see the artists interacting with their fans on all social media platforms. And if they are getting, you know, for us on DSPs, and especially Spotify, I look to followers. I want to see how many people are following you, because that's the people who are getting your music on release day. Those are the people. So that's our focus before putting out a track, is build, like, follow here, new music is coming. So on release day at midnight, that appears in their playlist, on their own personal playlist. So you really want to see authentic engagement on all platforms, on social media and on streaming. The lean back listening, like somebody, it's great. You can make a lot of money on lean back listening. But you also want to see sort of all levels of engagement. Somebody like a Donovan Woods is great. He's got high numbers on streaming. He's got over 1 million per month, and he's also able to sell tickets. And he's got a dedicated, it's not a huge social media following, but it's a dedicated one that are constantly engaged on his interactions.
It's a little bit more of a conversation. It's great that you have, you know, 50,000 Facebook fans, but how many people are actually converting? Like exactly. How much money does that actually convert to? How much tickets does that actually convert to? Like,
yeah.
It's that conversation that we had like 3 years ago when it came to the socials. So, you know, definitely this following on streaming is really important, and making sure that people are interacting in that way. How about you, Steph? Do you have any kind of insights on in your genre, like where you're looking at numbers?
Mm-hmm. So in looking at other jazz and folk artists, the kind of benchmark I'm seeing in terms of social media reach as the typical active Canadian jazz musician would have anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 followers on Facebook. A folk artist would probably be, 2,000, 5,000. When we look at streaming for jazz, if we're lucky, we could get 30 to 50,000 per project. We had our folk artist got placed on a official Spotify playlist in Germany. I had a Reeperbahn a couple years ago, and that playlist had 120,000 followers. So we ended up with 500,000 streams on that, which was a complete anomaly. But what was nice is because it was in Germany, the royalty rates were a little higher. So it wasn't a couple $100. It was, add a zero. So so that was handy. But for the remainder of his music, we're seeing probably, a year later into the album cycle, we're probably seeing 5,000 to 10,000 streams a month. And, that adds up over time. So, but yeah, the same experience as Mike, just because you have one blowout doesn't mean it's necessarily going to trickle down to the next one. I was really watching it and really hopeful that that one track that was listened to a lot over in Germany would generate a lot of new fans for him in that market that would trickle down to his other catalog. But it was it was a really strange song that they chose for that playlist. It kind of stood out as overtly different. So I didn't see a lot of trickle down in that case. And we have tried the playlisting consultants, and I was hopeful that it would create the kind of streams, that it would pay for itself, but we didn't find that happened. So I know, Erin, that's kind of your world of expertise, is that kind of digital marketing. Do you have any thoughts and tips and tricks for various genres that could be effective?
Um, for us, I think that for on the playlisting side, we always have a conversation about it's a marathon, not a sprint, because you get those anomalies and then people want them to keep happening. And it's just like, if I could make that happen all the time, I'd be far richer and having a small island somewhere right now and really enjoying my life. But I think that, you know, the points that you guys have made with the getting the follower numbers up and getting that interaction going on, that you really can, you know what your fan base is and what that conversion rate looks like on as a digital marketer is really important. Because I think things like Patreon and you know, streaming concerts and all those things are opening up more and more. And we're going to start the conversation about COVID right now. And I think looking at those kind of things and understanding them and making sure that you have a really strong engagement with your fan base. And it's not just you're pushing out information and sell all the time. And it's a relationship. It's a customer service relationship at the end of the day, is really important to remember. Because those are the people who are going to support you no matter what. And that, you know, that could be $1,000 a year, or it could be, you know, $100 a year. You just have to make sure that you're maintaining that relationship. So let's talk COVID. Not that we've been not talking about COVID for the last 2 months, and I'm a little sick of talking about COVID, but in the case of release strategies, have you guys seen any changes in planning, or have you changed any of your plans for releases this year because of what's happened?
We've done both. We've pushed back a release that we're doing with an international partner, mainly because the artist had really great visual stuff to create and wasn't able to do it. And so we realized that we needed to push it back. And it allows us sort of the time to sort of regroup, because we don't know when we're going to be able to make those assets, because it involves getting many people in a room. Whereas another artist who's more on the developing side and has been away for a while, we looked at it and said, you know, this is the time to do it. Like, there is a bit of space here because people are pushing their records into the fall or into 2021. An artist like Jill Barber, we're releasing a French record for her in June. And we had a mild glitch on LP manufacturing, but we're going ahead, and we've released singles and everything is going well. Because it's French, we were looking at Quebec specifically, and we aren't relying on a global tour or anything like that. We're looking at, you know, starting in France and Quebec, and hopefully that builds out by the time, you know, everything's fine and we're starting to move all our touring plans into early 2021. So I think overall, as a developing artist, there's room, there's space to sort of put your music out and get a bit of attention. But again, nobody has this crystal ball. So it's just like, you can hold on to stuff and hope to put it out in September, where it could be a massive amount of releases going on. And depending on how much touring, you know, your record relies on. So you can hold it until you're able to tour, but who knows when that will be.
We haven't changed our release schedules at all. We're going ahead with what we had planned. Obviously, we're losing tour opportunities and tour opportunities to 2021. That just puts more emphasis now on our social media content than ever before. So what I've found myself doing is working with our marketing folks and our social media people, and the artist more now to create their weekly posts and their weekly schedules of content to keep it fresh and all the rest of that stuff, while we wait for radio, still country radio anyway, to catch up, because they did go into a period there where all they were talking about was COVID, and they weren't playing as much music. And if you're a new artist, that can be a little bit of a struggle right now, but it just puts more pressure on your social media, the do-it-yourself model that is conducive or close to what we had previously. But to stop now and push everything off, I can't do that. We'd never get the momentum back. For new artists, I know that Tony on the acronym side has an artist that we're looking to get ready to go, a brand new artist as well too. And we feel that there might be an opportunity out there, that people are actually looking for new music. And so we're, you know, having those conversations with our streaming partners now and our distribution partners to see where this kid fits and what is the timeline and when should we push the button on this so that we can capitalize on any playlists that we can get on out of the gate and start to build what we can't physically do.
So oh, sorry, Stephanie, did you have any, like, what you guys are dealing with right now? What are you
just a couple quick thoughts on that. We have done both approaches since. We have gone ahead with a release and we have paused some releases. If I had had my choice, I would have moved back the one that was released. It went out at the end of March, and it was for an artist who is very heavy on touring. So what every publicist has ever told me is it's always much more beneficial to have tour dates around a release. That project was just too far down the line to hit pause on because there was that's the one where we're the Canada only deal, and there's labels in Europe and the US and Japan involved too. So we didn't have the opportunity to stall that one. Has it been as effective as her previous releases? No, but it's just a sign of the times. The other projects we've pushed back, were for a number of reasons on our end and the artist's end. But the main thing for us was there was a period there in April where the jazz charts in Canada weren't reporting and stations were kind of in limbo and they were transitioning to remote. They weren't accepting new music. They weren't playing new music. So that really limited the reach ability of releasing new music. So, that helped make the decision of, okay, well, why are we going to put something else out when we can easily hold back and save it for a time when it's going to be more effective.
Can I just touch on one other thing that I'm seeing in this period that we're in as well, Erin? Is that okay?
Of course.
In talking with our media and publicity people right now, and this is more for the independent artists, but this is the first time ever where every single doing it. So from a media point of view to the major television networks, they want Nickelback, they want Avril, they may not necessarily want you at that level. We're seeing that big time, which has got to be taken into consideration. It goes back to what we were talking about in terms of when to hire a media publicity person and all the rest of that stuff. You need to be cognizant of that fact right now, because that's real, that the opportunities that the media and publicity people would have right now are exceptionally limited, although they're busier than what they've ever been because of the opportunities that are out there, but they're looking for the superstar acts, number one. Number two is we are getting bombarded again in the country music side of what we do for digital performance, and we are really limiting how many we do of those because we don't want to devalue our artist's brand of music digitally and just give it all away for free, because then it's going to cause problems for us later on down the line when we get back to being able to tour and festival dates and all the rest of that stuff. So we are really, really picky about performances that we do. And we do it and all the rest of that stuff.
That's great. I think we're kind of running out of time. I've been going through and asking some of the questions that we have on the Q&A, which has been great. One of the other ones that maybe we can kind of wrap up with is that what if you're an artist that doesn't have new music to release right now, or say you've just released new music and your album's out there and we're in the situation that we're in, what would be, kind of your closing suggestions on what people should be doing right now to kind of, build up their audiences and kind of keep relevant in a time that we don't have a lot of answers in about when everything's going to go back to the new normal as it is, right? So Stephanie, why don't we start with you?
honestly, I have nothing to offer on that. We're struggling with that at that discussion at Arts Commons because, you know, we'd like to put out content too and we'd like to monetize it, but there's so much out there for free, and it's a supply and demand problem. You know, sure, the demand is up, but the supply is up too. So it's super hard to break through and try and monetize it, so that you can try and keep making a living. Like, most of the artists I work with are career 100% musicians. Like that is their livelihood. They teach, they gig, and that's their world. So I'm just gonna sit and listen to see if you guys have any thoughts, because
we released, with one of our artists, we released a single to radio on March 6th, and then his album on March 10th. And we had a cross-Canada radio and club tour plan that was going to start on March 27th that obviously hasn't happened. And it has severely dampened the momentum at radio and also within the streaming world. But we go out and do that. We need to control what we can control. And what we can control is the content that we can create and the interaction between the fans. So while we're making sure that our back end is up to date, is current, the artist also has interest in being a bartender. So we're doing cocktail drinks now that is tied into he loves to cook. So he's doing video snippets now that are going out to the radio stations, as instead of doing a song on the couch, he's actually cooking for them and cooking a meal, which is his passion, which is bringing in this whole other interest level to his music in a roundabout way without giving it away for free while we wait until we can get back out there again. But again, that's just that little unique stuff that you can do and you should be doing as an artist, that's just going to separate your brand from everybody else that's out there. Find that area and capitalize on it.
Yeah. Evan?
Yeah, I mean, we've also got to, I mean, I agree with Mike, and got to keep it in mind that this is a long game. And I know a lot of people have sort of rushed to streaming, to live streaming stuff. And I think there's a burnout potential on that. You've got to think that at some point we're going to turn the corner. To what we're turning the corner on is anyone's guess. But I think you want to maintain some level of relevance and exposure. But also keeping in mind that you don't want to be sort of becoming too much online. Too much exposure in this instance can be like, okay, I'm tired of seeing it, because people are tied to their computers and to their mobile devices. In terms of being able to promote a record and things like that, and I understand that there's money, you know, on the table potentially. Like some of our artists are doing side door stuff. You know, Justin Rutledge is revisiting, you know, doing live performances, as well as Jill, side door performances where they revisit a record or do a theme thing. And I think that's fine as a way to cater to your existing fan base. I don't know how many people are going to be looking to expand their fan bases right now, but I think keeping your fans engaged at some level without putting too much on them is helpful. I'm thinking sort of long game. You don't want to exhaust your fans at the moment, and you want to sort of think that this might go on for a really long time. And also, you know, we want to continue to be creative and to put out content. Tammy Nielsen puts out now a weekly show on YouTube. I'm not looking for any sort of monetization on it, but a way to sort of keep her fans engaged without throwing buy this or stream this down their throat. You know, doing a cooking show, doing something that's unique, you know, just to sort of have your name out there without driving it down people's throats.
That's really a really good point in terms of not burning out your fan base digitally. And with one of the artists that we have on our roster, Jess Moskaluke, when all this started coming down, we were getting absolutely bombarded with requests for digital appearances here, there, everywhere, to the point where it was like we were doing the same thing 20 times a day for 20 different radio stations. Jess came up with the idea of herself just to say, you know what, why don't I control my own Destiny here, and she launched her own Instagram show that happens every Thursday night for 45 minutes. She brings on a musical guest, and then she brings on one of her areas that she likes to talk about. So it's been hair extensions one week and lashes and nails tied in with artists in the genre, and the fans absolutely love it. And at the end of each one of those, she will request fans to join, and she will choose one, and she will have a digital conversation with this fan who's totally unexpected that they're going to be the chosen one. And it's working. It's working amazingly well in terms of every week we get more followers on that show, and people look forward to see who the musical guest is and what Jess is going to be talking about away from music, in addition to potentially being the fan that she talks to and has a conversation with at the end. That's great marketing. Not on her part, she came up with the idea and it's her thing, but she controls it all, and the radio stations love it because they now have content that they can use throughout the week without having just repeat the same thing 20 times over in various different videos.
That's great. I think this time is going to be we're going to look back at a great time of some really creative content and some great collaboration that maybe not going to be able to ever happen if this had never happened to us. So we'll see what happens. We're almost at like 2:30, guys, so I'm going to let you go, as it were. I know we all have things to do, but thank you all so much for being a part of this. Thanks for everyone who's joining. It's been a great panel. I think everything's been fantastic. CIMA, CARAS, of course, you guys, amazing for putting this on, and I'll turn it back over to you, Sam.